Welcome to the appendix, where we read the primary sources of the past so that the present can be better understood. Today's primary source, Quartering Act, March 24th, 1765. This act, passed at the express request of General Gage, was designed to supplement the Stamp Act and the Revenue Act of 1764. The failure of New York to comply in full with the terms of the Quartering Act led to the suspension of the legislative privileges of the Assembly. An act to amend and render more effectual in His Majesty's dominions in America, an act passed in this present session of Parliament, entitled An Act for punishing mutiny and desertion, and for the better payment of the army and their quarterers. Whereas, by the Mutiny Act of 1765, several regulations are made and enacted for the better government of the army, and their observing strict discipline, and for providing quarters for the army, and carriages on marches and other necessary occasions, and inflicting penalties on offenders against the same act, and for many other good purposes therein mentioned. But the same may not be sufficient for the forces that may be employed in His Majesty's dominions in America. And whereas, during the continuance of the said act, there may be occasion for marching and quartering of regiments and companies of His Majesty's forces in several parts of His Majesty's dominions in America. And whereas the public houses and barracks in His Majesty's dominions in America may not be sufficient to supply quarters for such forces, and whereas it is expedient and necessary that carriages and other conveniences upon the march of troops in His Majesty's dominions in America should be supplied for that purpose, be it enacted, that for and during the continuance of this act, and no longer, it shall and may be lawful to and for the constables, tithing men, magistrates, and other civil officers of villages, towns, townships, city districts, and other places within His Majesty's dominions in America, and in their default or absence, for any one justice of the peace inhabiting in or near any such villages, township, city, district, or place, or for no others, and such constables and other officers as aforesaid are hereby required to billet and quarter the officers and soldiers in His Majesty's service in the barracks provided by the colonies, and if there shall not be sufficient room in the said barracks for the officers and soldiers, then, and in such case only, to quarter and billet the residue of such officers and soldiers for whom there shall not be room in such barracks, in inns, lively stables, alehouses, victualling houses, and the houses of settlers, of wine by retail to be drank in their own houses or places thereunto belonging, and all houses of persons selling of rum, brandy, strong water, cider, or metheglin by retail to be drank in houses, and in case there shall not be sufficient room for the officers and soldiers in such barracks, inns, victualling, and other public alehouses, that in such and no other case, and upon no other account, it shall and may be lawful for the governor and council of each respective province in His Majesty's dominion in America to authorize and appoint, and they are hereby directed and empowered to authorize and appoint such proper person or persons as they shall think fit to take, hire, and make fit, and in default of the said governor and council, appointing and authorizing such person or persons, or in default of such person or persons so appointed, neglecting or refusing to do their duty. In that case it shall and may be lawful for any two or more of His Majesty's justices of the peace in or near the said villages, towns, townships, cities, districts, and other places, that they are hereby required to take hire and make fit for the reception of the Majesty's forces, such and so many uninhabited houses, outhouses, barns, or other buildings as shall be necessary to quarter therein the residue of such officers and soldiers for whom there should not be room in such barracks and public houses as aforesaid. 2. And is hereby declared and enacted that there shall be no more bullets of any time ordered, that there are effective soldiers present to be quartered therein, and in order that this service may be effectually provided for, the Commander-in-Chief in America, or other officer under whose order any regiment or company shall march, shall from time to time give as early notice as conveniently may be in writing, signed by such commander or officer, of their march, specifying their numbers and time of marching as near as may be to the respective governors of each province through which they are to march. 3. Military officers taking upon themselves to quarter soldiers contrary to this act, or using any menace to a civil officer to deter them from their duty, to be cashiered. Persons aggrieved by being quartered on many may complain to the justices and be relieved. 5. Provided nevertheless, and it is hereby enacted, that the officers and soldiers so quartered, bulleted, as aforesaid, except such as shall be quartered in the barracks and hired uninhabited houses and other buildings as aforesaid, shall be received and furnished with diet and small beer, cider, or rum mixed with water by the owners of the inns, livery stables, alehouses, victualling houses, and other houses in which they are allowed to be quartered, and bulleted by this act, paying and allowing for the same the several rates herein after mentioned to be payable out of the substance money for diet and small beer, cider, or rum mixed with water. 6. Provided always that in case of any innholder or person on whom may non-commissioned officers or private men shall be quartered by virtue of this act, except on a march or employed in recruiting, and likewise except the recruits by them raised for the space of 7 days at most, for such non-commissioned officers and soldiers who are recruiting and recruits by them raised, shall be desirous to furnish such non-commissioned officers or soldiers with candles, vinegar, and salt, and with small beer or cider not exceeding 5 pints, or half a pint of rum mixed with a quart of water, for each man per diem gratis, and allow to such non-commissioned officers or soldiers the use of fire and the necessary utensils for dressing and eating their meal, and shall give notice of such his desire to the commanding officer, and shall furnish and allow the same accordingly. Then the non-commissioned officers and soldiers so quartered shall provide their own victuals, and the officer to whom it belongs to receive, or that actually does receive, the pay and substance of such non-commissioned officers and soldiers shall pay the several sums herein after mentioned to be payable out of the substance money for diet and small beer to the non-commissioned officers and soldiers aforesaid. 7. And whereas there are several barracks in several places in the Majesty's said dominions in America, or some of them provided by the colonies for the lodging and covering of soldiers in lieu of quarters, for the ease and conveniency as well of the inhabitants of and in such colonies as of the soldiers, it is hereby further enacted that all such officers and soldiers so put and placed in such barracks or in hired uninhabited houses, outhouses, barns, or other buildings shall, from time to time, be furnished and supplied there by the persons to be authorized or appointed for that purpose by the governor and council of each respective province, or upon neglect or refusal of such governor and council in any place, then by 2 or more justices of the peace, residing in or near such place, with fire, candles, vinegar, and salt, bedding, utensils for dressing their victuals, and small beer or cider, not exceeding 5 pence or half a pint of rum, mixed with a quart of water, to each man, without paying anything for the same. 30. And be it further enacted, that this act shall continue and be in force in all of His Majesty's dominions in America from March 24th, 1765 until March 24th, 1767. Thank you for joining us for our primary source today on the Appendix. We will see you in the stacks.